It is taking forever to do this. Come on. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Premier Injuries Deadline live stream for all your FPL needs. Not sure how long we were live there for it. It just absolutely froze there, so apologies with the kind of belated start there. But just before we get into the injury news and all the information that you need, do head over to the Premier Injuries website. So if we don't answer your questions today, you can get all your information there. And just like we're going to do with the live stream, you can go through all the teams alphabetically from Bournemouth all the way down to Wolves. But yeah, just to remind everybody, that is how we're going to be doing it today. So if you do have specific player questions, wait for that team or put them in the chat, but we'll get to them a little bit later. But as always, before we start as well, we have to make sure, how are you doing today, Ben?
I'm all right, my friend. Feels like it's been an absolute lifetime. Obviously, FA Cup fourth round fixtures last weekend. So I think it's been 2 weeks now since we've had a deadline live stream. So it's good to be back. Apologies in advance if the microphone does go off. I'm not really sure what's happening with that. We call it an intermittent fault. But yeah, other than that, look, ready to go, ready to rock. I know it's a Friday. We've got the early deadline. Chelsea playing Fulham tonight. So everything's condensed into these few hours. So every moment is precious, Jason.
Exactly. So we're going to go straight into Bournemouth's team news and any updates there that people need to be aware of.
Gary O'Neill, very coy with regards to team news updates. What we do know, Dominic Solanke and Marcus Tavernier have trained all week. However, the Cherries boss wouldn't commit on their availability. I do think that they'll probably be pushing to be in and around that squad. Certainly Solanke is a player who hasn't been sidelined too long, so that could potentially force him into the 11. This is one of those the witching hour, as I call it, the 1 to 2 p.m. press conferences. So there will be updates in and around this. This is why it may look a little bit, I'm going to say out of date, but like I say, the news is hot off the press and we haven't had a chance to go through them all. We do know that the likes of David Brooks, long-term, Ryan Fredericks, also Junior Stanislas, they're all remain in the treatment room, their sidelines. Gary O'Neill didn't rule out the possibility of including some of his January signings in that starting 11.
So let's go on. So just in the chat, we've got a couple of hey lads there from John Dre. Cedric says, greetings, gentlemen. And Dejarge says, hello, guys. Sorry if I butchered any names there. But GV says, Bournemouth before the World Cup break were a good team for defensive play. What happened post World Cup? I mean, is there any reasons for that? I think from memory, goalkeeper Neto got injured. Would that play a part?
I mean, were they good or were they just grinding out results against opposition, which maybe didn't have the quality of the sides that they had faced earlier in the season? Of course, there's always that period of acclimatization as well. New players coming in. I know Senesi was one of those big buys. He hasn't really settled. You got rid of, you had a little bit of bounce under Gary O'Neill, particularly, when he was that interim boss. And yeah, look, the Cherries, like I say, they've been able to grind out results, but has there been any massive improvement in the side? I don't think so. It's maybe he's carrying a little bit of luck and maybe his opposition maybe a little bit inferior to what they had faced, when they first came up.
Now, with Arsenal, we'll move on to the Gunners, obviously still flying high at the top of the table. But there was a couple of concerns in the team. First of all, tactically, I think it's interesting, as always, you change these as it goes along. But you kept Ben White at right back because I think the last few games, Tomiyasu's actually looked a little bit better. And then also, is Thomas Partey all right for this game? That was the big concern, especially among Arsenal fans. They're worried, oh God, the title race is over because we've lost Thomas Partey.
Yeah, the Ben White situation with Mikel Arteta, he's a big fan. And I think it's difficult. That's why I'm giving him a vote of confidence, the way he has performed, or that perception. I mean, I'm not a big fan as it happens, but Mikel Arteta does like the work that he's done, and I do see lots of or more rotation, or certainly restricted minutes. And the fact that, like you say, Mikel Arteta has options on either flank now to be able to rest the legs of Zinchenko or Ben White as and when needed. So Ben White to start with, Tomiyasu probably minutes from the bench, in my opinion. In midfield, Thomas Partey. This is the big question mark. That was a rib injury. He'll need to come through a full training session on Friday, or at least take part in a full contact session. There is a possibility that he could wear some kind of protective shield for that rib, but just given the nature of that problem, and obviously he needs to be able to be comfortable and breathe. It's a difficult one, so it's going to be a good balance between protecting that area and for him to be able to fully function and move around the field. So it remains to be seen. Big question marks here with that one. That was an injury picked up in the FA Cup. Possibly could see Jorginho make his debut. That's maybe what I'm leaning towards. But of course, like I say, we don't know how that's going to pan out until we see, if parties come through that session and, more importantly, manage to do that without any kind of reaction.
One question that we do have from Jandre that links on nicely onto your point about Jorginho. What kind of role do you expect him to play in the Premier League? Is he going to be a regular, or is he going to kind of be a bench player? Is he just there for the squad?
I mean, you're the Arsenal supporter, so you probably have a little bit more insight than me. But from the outside looking in, I don't see Mikel Arteta veering too far away from this starting 11. For the most part, they're top of the league for a reason. They've been putting in performances. Yeah, there might be some slight rotation around that congested fixture periods, when those fixtures are coming thick and fast. But if players are fully fit, I don't really see the likes of Jorginho moving Thomas Partey or Granit Xhaka or Martin Odegaard. I just don't see it. He's a different type of profile. He's a move away from what they already have. He has a very calming influence on the team, slows players down, which is, like I say, it's a move away from what we've seen Arteta do when it's been, that fast, high press, young, explosive players who are carrying out a game plan. So for me, it's more of a stopgap, just in the absence of Mo Elneny, who is probably out for the remainder of the season.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think Jorginho's in there for the squad, maybe for those European games as well, just to give a bit of depth, bit of cover. Like you said, El Nene's out. We've seen Lokonga go on loan to Crystal Palace, but also he's just not of the level that we need. And he's a fairly good player. I think most of this transfer window, Arsenal did have kind of big signing ideas. They went for Caicedo and Mudryk, but then they didn't get those. So you think, right, we'll just consolidate the squad and make the squad a little bit better just for that title push. I think it's all about the title push now. And then also Jandre has quickly asked, Zinchenko first choice above Tierney. I think he has been all season, really, hasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when Zinchenko is fully fit, he gets a nod over Tierney.
So let's move it to Aston Villa. I think Villa fans will be very upset with the transfer window. They did get Moreno as a left-back kind of cover, which I think is an important signing. But the rest of the team, it needed improvements all over the pitch, frankly, but they didn't get it. But especially up top, Watkins and Bailey are the kind of two forwards left in the side now. I think it's kind of a bit disappointing, but is there any injury reasons why people should be worried about the team?
No, I mean, it's generally good news from the Villa camp. And we have confirmation that John McGinn, hamstring, and also Lucas Digne, that worrisome shoulder problem that he picked up a few weeks back, they're both been involved in full training. I think maybe it's a little bit too early just in terms of John McGinn, which is why I've retained Ramsey on that right-hand side, and also Moreno as well. I don't think Digne has been in great form when he has been fit. Moreno looks like a solid player. I think he's looked interesting. There's definitely potential, so that's why I've left Merino in there as well.
Yeah, I think just looking at it, Villa needed to do a little bit more. But we're going to move it to Brentford, who didn't do that much either. And Ivan Toney's still in the team. Well, what is the injury information there, though, instead of the kind of worries about potential off-field situations?
Yeah, we're waiting to hear from Thomas Frank. So in terms of availability, there's a couple of players who should be closing in on a return, but given their recent form, I don't expect too many changes to that starting 11. Josh De Silva is one who could potentially come in. That would mean that maybe Janelt is forced out. Jensen swaps the other side of Norgård. That's a possibility. It's a very sort of fluid formation setup. It's a 3-5-2. In possession, which drops to maybe a 5-3-2, well defending. The other potential, and we've spoke about it before, the influence of Johan Wissa and his goal involvements per minute ratio is actually better than that of Ivan Toney. But of course, you need to contextualise because he's a player who doesn't see a lot of game time in the league. But for now, I have him on the bench.
And what about their new loan signing, Kevin? Is it Shader? He's from Germany. Right winger. How do you see him fitting into this squad? Is it again just kind of a squad embellishment? It's not really going to be a first team starter.
Yeah, it's difficult. We've seen a few arrivals into the Brentford squad from the summer and haven't, they failed to sort of really establish themselves within that team. Lewis Potter being one of those that came, highly recommended, and we are expecting big things. Always difficult, of course, with the deadline only closed late on Tuesday evening, and we don't quite know how players are in terms of their fitness, their recoveries, what kind of systems have been playing. And things like that. So it's going to take a little bit of a while for players to settle in and how they're adapting, how quickly they take up things. That'll be measured on an individual basis.
Now, we had a really good question from one of our listeners, Slavcho. He asked about Brighton. So we're going to move to the Seagulls now. And he said, do you think the high demand for Brighton players will mess with their heads and the team will suffer from it? What do you think on that, Ben, in terms of it? Because I think not too many injuries in the team. I mean, we'll cover that as well. But psychologically, could the Caicedo situation maybe unhinge the team a little bit? Because he did want to leave. He said it publicly. And he's kind of been forced to stay.
Look, this is a difficult one. He's a young player. He's plying his trade. He's still learning his craft. There's lots of facets which are, he does really well in his game. Others, there's some big areas for improvement. Under Roberto De Zerba, the Seagulls are flying, as it were. And you know what? He strikes me as the kind of guy that's come in and, he's no nonsense. But he's got this togetherness about the squad. We've seen the departure of Leandro Trossard. It's my way, you toe the line or you're gone. And, we have other players who are capable of coming in and taking that place. Alexi McAllister being suspended is going to be a big one this weekend. But of course, Brighton coped with him, while he was, post World Cup when he was still celebrating out in Buenos Aires. Look, we'll see how Caicedo responds to all of this. He's a professional. He may be a little bit too disappointed, but you know what? He's got a contract in place, and he may want to go out and prove himself and put himself out in the shop window once again.
So we do have Slavcho once again asking very good questions here. Chelsea, he says, do you think that Chelsea will start finally to gain points? Well, he's asked it about Liverpool as well, but we'll get to them a little bit later. I mean, just from my opinions on what's happened with the transfers and everything, I don't know if they've improved the squads in the areas that needed improving. They bought in so many players, and obviously there's a kind of long-termist trend. Enzo Fernandez, Modric are kind of players for the future, but as well in the here and now, there was some really big problems in the team that I think needed sorting a little bit more. Like, who's going to replace N'Golo Kante in the long term? Koulibaly, Thiago Silva are the two main centre backs. Who's going to be back up to Reece James? There's a lot of areas in the team where the team are lacking, and now they've kind of constrained themselves because they've signed themselves up to all these long-term contracts. Todd Bowley thinks he's been very clever with the amortization over long term, but really, and then the final thing is Havertz. I don't think he's good enough to be the Chelsea main goal scorer. So they've not bought like a striker as well. That's why they bought Aubameyang. I don't know if they've actually improved the squad all that much, Ben.
Difficult one. I'm with you, Jason. I think there was a couple of glaring opportunities missed in terms of strengthening that squad when you look at how much money they've been thrown around. And let's not forget, we're reliant upon as well a centre-back, Thiago Silva, who is, certainly in the twilight years of his career. He's a pivotal player in that back line. Does the likes of Koulibaly come in, and is that a like-for-like replacement? I still think they're missing a top-class centre-half. The others, may grow. They have potential to be able to fill that void. But for the here and now, I think, which is what the supporters will demand, given how much money's been spent by Graham Potter and the American owners, then it's all well and good. You opt in for those younger type players, but like I say, you need maybe a little bit of experience and a little bit of know-how, and you need to come in and you still need to be getting those results. And obviously, I think minimum you've got to be pushing for European football, and ideally that has to be Champions League.
And as well with the squad, I think they could already be discontent because they can only register 3 of those signings for the Champions League. What's going to happen to those that don't make the squad? Graham Potter's got some very difficult conversations. But in terms of Champions League as well, Ziyech was going to go off to one of their rivals. Do you think that means, as always we say to people, Giandre said Ziyech in the first team with the PSG move falling through, but obviously you might not have had time to update this. But the other thing as well is we've got a few questions on Reece James. Eric has said the chances of him making the first 11.
Ben Chilwell and Reece James are both trained, but we all know that a return to train isn't necessarily return to play. And given both players' injury histories and how long they've been out, I just think that lack of sharpness is a slight worry, and that's why I don't have them in Graham Potter's starting 11 for Friday evening. And yeah, I do have those concerns as well about Hakim Ziyech. He did return to London. One of those things, it was an admin error, I understand, which put a kibosh on his move to PSG. But in terms of available personnel to Graham Potter, given the fact that Raheem Sterling is also in contention but lacks fitness, Christian Pulisic is out, Aubameyang should be gone and nowhere near that squad. I just struggle. I really did struggle to try and understand how this team would line up, and Ziyech was the one that stood out. And Graham Potter did speak to him in high regard, and he has spoken about him being back on the training pitches and getting on with business and understanding that it's just one of those things that happens. So that's why I have him in the starting 11. But look, there are question marks maybe on whether he will actually be in that team.
Now, from North London, or at least West London, to South London, Crystal Palace, definitely not a transfer we know for them to remember. The incomings are Ahamada, again, apologies if I've butchered that, and Lakonga as well. But injury-wise, how is the team looking?
Big blow to lose Wilfried Zaha. Of course, he limped off with a hamstring-related issue against our boys Newcastle down at Selhurst Park. That looked to be a high hamstring problem. So when we talk about proximal, which is more close to the tendon, those tend to be on the higher scale of the severity. Now, Patrick Vieira said the winger could be at least another couple of weeks, but wouldn't be pinned down. I think I initially said at the time we're maybe looking at 4 to 6, which would fit that timeline. Also, Joachim Andersen hasn't recovered as quickly as hoped from a calf problem, so we have Chris Richards alongside Mark Guy.
We do have to bring it back. Eb Celio has asked, actually, I think a good question as well. As an Arsenal fan, as you mentioned earlier, Gabriel Jesus, he's posted pictures of himself out on the training ground, something that you literally just said about 2 minutes ago. Training doesn't mean return to play is necessarily anytime soon. But with those pictures of himself, the fact that he's out there training, getting some movement in there into his legs, what kind of timeline do you see now?
I read absolutely nothing into those pictures from the training ground, by the way. You're talking about a snapshot in time. They can be twisted or interpreted in any way, shape, or form. I think ultimately what you need Gabriel Jesus to be taking part in is full contact training with the squad. And it's going to take a period of time even to just get that little bit of sharpness back. That initial injury was around about 3 to sort of 4 months. So you can't rule out a possibility of a return maybe by late February. But I think realistically, given the fact that that injury occurred at the World Cup beginning of December, I think we're probably looking maybe beginning of March. So look, great that he's progressing and moving forward nicely, but the player still needs to be protected. It's not necessarily just about, being available, as quick as you possibly can. You need to ensure that once he returns to the pitch, he's going to stay fit.
And the other thing as well is, what you talk about quite often is they could have that picture, he could go out to training, and then he could feel something wrong. And that's not going to be communicated to people. So you could be going, oh, look at this analysis, we're looking at his movement or whatever. And then afterwards he's got to sit there with, ice on his leg because it's aggravated the injury again. We just don't know with those sorts of things. GV has asked, with Zaha out injured, will Palace play slightly differently? I mean, with Crystal Palace, there's big concerns over the fact that they're struggling to score goals, even with Zaha in the side. So I think it's going to be a bit of a worry. But Everton, I think they're the only team in the Premier League that didn't sign a player during the transfer window, which, if any team needed to sign people, Everton did. It's really worrying. But maybe the biggest signing that they did was getting a new manager. Sean Dyche, one of the best. I really, really do rate him. And it could save the team by just getting him in. But what is the injury situation there? And also, maybe some people have seen it as well. Again, you don't want to read too much into it, but apparently they were doing the bleep test at Everton this week.
Yeah, look, you don't want to read too much into that. It's just a, way of finding base levels of fitness of the players and to see what he's working with. That's all. Nothing really too much in that. Sean Dyche is just gathering information and understanding his squad, the capabilities, understanding his methodologies. Has he got the personnel in place who will be able to carry out a game plan? So we just want, these things are always like taken out of context and always good for the headlines. But so, that's not something that I'm overly concerned about. Like you say, Everton failed to make any new signings. And you almost feel sorry for Sean Dyche in a way. He went from Burnley, massively under-resourced on a shoestring budget. And then he comes in Everton, all of those former managers spending all that money, splashing the cash, and he's been told to sort of rein things in and have the, scour the markets for free agents. But what we do know about Sean Dyche is he will always, or he has done previously, he'll always, bang out a 4-4-2. Absolutely loves a 4-4-2. I'm not even sure I've ever seen a formation that he hasn't played with that type of lineup. So that brings a couple of questions in with regards to personnel for Everton. And I've probably went with a little bit of a surprise offering here and putting Nimupai up there with Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Of course, we know Calvert-Lewin isn't fully up to speed off those, severely hampered 18 or so months. So maybe Nupai up there just to ease a little bit of that burden, ease a little bit of that workload. And, that's something that could maybe potentially pay off. The other possibility that you're seeing with Sean Dyche could maybe, he was reunited with former player Dwight McNeil. So that's a possibility. Should he maybe surprisingly change his formation and go with a 4-2-3-1, you could have McNeil out on the wing with maybe Iwobi playing more in a central role.
Apparently, I don't know if this is true, Sam is saying that Godfrey won the bleep test. So does that mean he's automatically in the starting 11?
Look, I mean, if he won the bleep test, that certainly means that he's in a good place with regards to his fitness. But again, we know that the player has been struggling with an injury and he needs to be taking part, in full contact work and twisting and turning in those challenges. So, straight line running, which predominantly that bleep test is, then it is possible that he could do that, but certainly not be ready for a return to the Premier League.
Now, in the comments here, we have the beautiful Italian stallion himself, Gianni Buttici. He says, "Hey guys, GB, G Unit. Hope he's doing well. I sent him a few messages this morning actually, so he is doing very well. But we're going to move to Fulham. Jandre has actually hit a point here. New manager bounce, hopefully not upsetting Arsenal. Totally agree with that. Fulham, though, any sort of injury news that people need to be aware of?
No, nothing major. Mitrovic is, hampered by that ongoing foot problem picked up during that international break back in October. Mar Silva likes to mention it and on the odd occasion in a press conference, but he always seems to roll Mitrovic out for the games week in and week out. Don't see a great deal of change in here. He's mentioned that it was the same squad of players that was available from the FA Cup 4th round tie last week. That travelling squad didn't include Anthony Robinson. However, I understand that the US international was absent due to tactical reasons and nothing else. Elsewhere within that squad, we sometimes see some flip-flopping between Diop and Tyson. Diop, I think, has started the majority of maybe 8 of the last 11 games, so that's why he gets a nod. Those flip-flops tend to happen when games come in quick succession.
And Johnny has a question actually himself. He says, hoping Dyche goes with Patterson when he's back fit. But the question is, Ben, when is he going to be fit?
Initial timeline, that was MCL injury, so we're looking at around about 6 weeks. So all being well, and these things are never guaranteed, we're hoping maybe mid to late February.
Now, Leeds had a big injury blow with their team. Rodrigo is out. How do you expect the team to adapt to that situation?
Yeah, it could be a like-for-like swap. We know that Rodriguez been playing slightly higher up the field in the absence of Patrick Bamford, certainly while he's been getting back up to speed. So that maybe opens the door for Bamford or even new signing Jorginho Rutter to come straight in there. I've went with Bamford for the moment. He had his first start in a long time in the FA Cup, 75 minutes, Accrington Stanley. Came through that well, came through it unscathed, although very tired or exhausted, as Jessamar said. So really it's between Rutter and Bamford. Look, I put my hands on my heart and say I don't know a great deal about Rutter, if the truth be told. Only that Jess March said he's brought him in, he is ready, and he's very excited to hand him the opportunity. But like I say, I've went with Bamford.
I was a little bit disappointed though when you said Accrington Stanley. You didn't go Accrington Stanley. Who are they?
Well, I say that. You say you tee that up. I tee it up for you, Jay.
Oh, okay. Accrington
so
Stanley.
I'm disappointed that you didn't do that.
Oh, okay. I was gonna do it again, but we've lost the moment there.
Oh no! I hope Johnny's still not watching. we never had these problems on our Instagram live streams.
Just hopefully people in the live stream actually know the reference as well. Otherwise, they're going to think that we're lunatics. Leicester. I mean, what is the big news there? Is Maddison going to be starting?
I think so. Yeah, I think he needs to. I don't think Brendan Rodgers can afford to leave him out of that starting lineup for any longer. What he brings to that that Leicester team, it's night and day. Their performances and their points per game ratio with Maddison starting, and when he doesn't, again, he got some valuable minutes in the FA Cup. He came off around about that hour mark. Again, that was probably Brendan Rodgers looking to protect the player. You need to integrate him and build him up gradually. I can see another 65 to 75 minute role this weekend. Dewsbury Hall also getting back up to speed following that glute problem. Jamie Vardy, he suffered a similar injury to Dewsbury Hall, but he has been back on the training pitches this week. Hasn't done a great deal of work, so that's why I've went with Padson Daka. They're elsewhere within the team. There are a few, I suppose, positions maybe up for grabs. Harry Souttar was one that I would have loved to throw straight back in there. Seen him at the World Cup. Looks a really good, no-nonsense, solid centre-back, but he's been struggling with a hip problem that he picked up at Stoke. So that's why I've left Marty in there, because ideally I would have started with Souttar and probably pushed Marty back into his more favoured role in midfield.
So Johnny has said he is still on the stream with us, Ben, so I don't know if you're a bit embarrassed from that. And Cedric, love Cedric, he said you forgot to drink some milk, Jason. But we do move on to Liverpool after talking about Accrington Stanley. What is the latest there? Because it just seems to be blow after blow for the team. Konate is now injured in that back line. It seems to be a repeat of a few seasons ago where just one has fallen, then another, then another, then another, and the team as a whole has taken a mammoth kind of hit here in terms of personnel that they can actually field.
Yeah, it's been a season to forget really for Liverpool, 2022 to 23. On all fronts, and certainly on the injury front, massive amounts of injuries. They currently lead the injury table with time loss absence, which is a little bit disappointing. But you dust yourself on and you carry on. They still have Joe Gomez and Joel Matip to sit in that central pairing. Virgil van Dijk will hopefully take part in first team training or aspects of it from next week. Konate, that hamstring issue, we're probably looking at around about 2 to 3 weeks. So, it's not too serious, but it's just more of a, it's problematic in terms of, it takes him out of that squad and it's more disruption to Jurgen Klopp's lineup. I also got Bacic, whatever his name is. I have him starting ahead of Fabinho. By his own admission, the player, hasn't been pulling up any trees. Jurgen Klopp even referenced it at his press conference on Friday. He spoke about how the Brazilian isn't too happy with his performance, and understands the fact that he's actually out of the starting 11. I've also have Naby Keita on that right-hand side ahead of Jordan Henderson. These players are a lot more explosive, a lot more able to carry out the game plan of Jurgen Klopp in terms of that really high, energetic press, which Liverpool have missed out on in those early parts, and that's why there's been lots of holes in that Liverpool sort of line for the opposition to be able to exploit.
Well, there you go. Maybe if the explosive players are out there can be a turnaround, which was one of the questions I think from Slavcho a little bit earlier. But Manchester City, we were rocked by the news that Cancelo was leaving. He was solid, locked into that team, and then all of a sudden, within a few hours, he was out of the club. But how is that going to affect the lineup of the team going forward? Is Ake, a lot of people are going to be invested in him, but some people have sent in the quote that Laporte, apparently Pep Guardiola likes him in the same position as well. I mean, what is going to happen going forward, Ben?
Yeah, well, Pep will rotate, as Pep always has done. So that'll come as no surprise. And like you see on that left-hand side, you do have Ake and Laporte, who will probably be vying for that space. Now, Pep talked about how he sort of tinkered with a few things during that mini pre-season when the World Cup was on, and different formations and again, methodologies and philosophies. And he said he liked what he saw. And that meant that Joe Cancelo fell down the pecking order. And for a player who wanted to start every game, he just wasn't happy with that. And because he wasn't happy, he allowed him to leave the club. Now, you'll see here there's a slight tweak in that traditional formation that we've seen from Pep, who seems to evolve from that 4-2-3-1 to that solid maybe 4-4-2. We're seeing it. What now is a 3-2-4-1 that we've seen deployed in recent weeks, and you could, there's players who can move in and around that. I do have Walker on the right side of that three, but like I say, that's fairly interchangeable. Unfortunately, John Stones could be out for up to a month. That's his fifth hamstring related issue of the season that put him out last Friday's game. So that wasn't great news with regards to that. Phil Foden, however, is over his recent foot issue. He has trained very well this week. Pep Guardiola wouldn't commit on his availability, but I understand that he will be included in the City squad.
I noticed nobody has asked in the comments this week, will you bet your house on Phil Foden starting? Maybe they've realised you've lost several houses now just from betting on Foden starting.
I will hang my hat on the fact that I did get 10 out of 11 in terms of a start. One game week somewhere back in the ether.
And Jandre's noticed it as well. Crazy formation. But it's the way Pep is playing. And I think if people check out my Patreon, I think that it's to the detriment of the club a little bit, because it's to fit in Haaland, and because of his lack of defensive work, it is costing the team at times. But Manchester United, what is the latest there? I think a big blow has been Eriksen.
Yeah, massive. Late April, early May, and even no guarantees with that. So that was a tackle from former Newcastle United striker Andy Carroll in the FA Cup. Many believe in that challenge. Fully deserved a red card and not the caution that he actually did receive. Now, lots of talking points within this United lineup. So I'll try to address some of those and offer my rationale and reasons behind that left back, Malaysia. I've got him ahead of Luke Shaw. Done a great job in his absence. Luke Shaw had missed the last two before returning in that Carabao Cup second leg. But with this double game week, I'm just a little bit concerned that throwing Luke Shaw in for 3 games in a week might be a little bit too much. And, like I say, Malaysia probably deserves a start. So it's one or the other for this weekend's game, and I would expect Erik ten Hag to rotate next week in that second match. In midfield, lots of talk again about Sabitzer maybe coming straight in following his arrival from Bayern Munich on loan. He's only trained once fully with the squad, and I think it would be a little bit harsh on Fred, if he was overlooked in that position. So again, that's why I have Fred in there. In attack, Anthony Martial returned against Nottingham Forest and got himself a goal, but he's working his way up to full fitness, and Jadon Sancho just isn't quite there to compete with Anthony for that start on the right-hand side, in my opinion.
We're going to turn our attention to the Toon, and what is the injury situation there? Bruno Guimaraes is obviously banned for 3 games, but that isn't an injury. So is there anybody floating in around the team that may be in now?
Yeah, this probably made things a little bit easier for me in terms of identifying that starting 11. Alexander Isak picked up, he was shown signs of concussion when he was replaced on Tuesday night. Now, Eddie Howe kept his cards very close to his chest and almost dismissed that he understands the protocols. So wouldn't say whether Alexander Isak would be available for tomorrow night's game against West Ham. If he was, then I would put him probably on the left-hand side in the role of Joe Linton, with Joe Linton dropping a little bit deeper and Longstaff moving centrally. But as it stands, I'm going to play the percentages here and say Sant Maxim comes in on the left-hand side. Elsewhere on the team, they practically pick themselves after recent games.
Yeah, they're looking.
And
so
if
good.
Gianni is still listening, Bruno is absolutely going nowhere ever, by the way, because there's nobody going to be to prize him away from Newcastle upon Tyne at the end of this season. I'm telling you that now, guaranteed.
And just as well, I've mentioned it a little bit earlier, I do have a Patreon. I'm going to be releasing an analysis on Newcastle today about their attack. Ben, you might want to look away because it's analysing why the attack isn't doing all that good. Nottingham Forest up next. I don't think too many people are invested. We got a new member on the live stream today. We've got Gianni obviously in the comments, and then we've got little Ben there as well.
This is what happens when the schools have a teacher training day.
But Nottingham Forest up next. Yeah, they've signed Keylor Navas, but is he going to be starting, or is it Hennessy as you put him there?
Do you know what? I think I'll probably go with Navas, if the truth be told. I can't, they moved quickly to bring him in. There were discussions with regards to the financial package that was required to bring him in on loan. Of course, Dean Henderson isn't going to be too far away. Suggestion that he's maybe only 2 to 3 weeks potentially. So that, gives Steve Cooper a little bit of a headache further down the line. But for now, I think I'm going to put Navas in ahead of Wayne Hennessy.
A great addition in the background there, Ben. Southampton, again, I don't think too many people are interested in the Saints. Just quickly, because I know you push for time here, you got like maybe a couple minutes left.
Yeah, Kyle Walker-Peters limped off against Newcastle in the Carabao Cup second leg on Tuesday night. Nathan Jones said that was more of a precautionary withdrawal, a little bit of tightness in his hamstring, but given the fact that he spent time out this season due to similar issues, I'm not having him starting this weekend. I think is it James Bree, a rival from Luton. He did play in the Cup. I'd have him starting at right back to make his Premier League debut.
Tottenham, any information on Spurs, apart from their very weird situation with letting Doherty go?
Yeah, that was a little bit disappointing. I actually had Doherty in my fantasy football team. I thought, post World Cup that he would, really kick on in the second half of the season. There you go. Emerson was never the answer, and if he was, I'm not really sure what the question was. But elsewhere within that team, Richarlison passed fit, missed out in the FA Cup due to an adductor issue, and there's also a potential return for Lucas Moura. He played 40 minutes in a youth game earlier this week, and he has trained. That's been a loading issue with his Achilles tendonitis, but it's great to see him back in contention.
And I'm just putting a poll in the chat for you, Ben. Should Ben Dinnery Jr. be a permanent fixture on the show going forward? Because I think he's been a star already. Let's move to West Ham and then Wolves, and then we're wrapping up the show here. But yes, what is the latest for the Hammers?
Waiting to hear from David Moyes, or shall I say his press conference was taking part at the same time as our live stream. What we do know, Maxwell Cornet returned to Rush Green, I think it is where West Ham are, Rush Green, earlier this week. He spent around about a month in France trying to get to the bottom of this calf issue. Even if he is injury-free, he's probably still at least 2 weeks away from being in contention for that team. Danny Ings suffered a setback on his debut. He's getting injections for that, but we understand that he's still, again, he'd be lucky to play again this month. Gianluca Scamacca is one who had his final injection in his knee this week. David Moyes may or may not have confirmed his availability. I would probably say, he's going to be a little bit short, certainly in terms of fitness. That's why we have Mikel Antonio and also Kurt Zouma. He looks to be out. Only recently returned from that long-term problem. Not uncommon to see players, pick up soft tissue injuries, when they come back into the fore. And sure enough, that's what's happened with Zouma. So, yeah, he's not available for now.
And the final team, Wolves. What is the latest there?
No fresh injury concerns, but good news with regards to the potential return of Pedro Neto. We'll hopefully look to join the first team in full training, maybe over the next 7 to 10 days. All being well, that should hopefully put him in contention for maybe the back end of February or going into early March. But no, elsewhere, that's pretty much about it. Lopetegui did mention the possibility of Craig Dawson making his start. Of course, he arrived from West Ham during that January window.
Right. Well, Ben has to shoot off now. I think, you've got You've got so many things to do. You're a busy, busy man. So we're just going to say thanks for everybody for tuning in. Really great to interact with you all. And I hope that we've answered all your questions as well as possible. And just quickly, Ben, as well, the people have made their decision very, very clear. It is a massive 82% of people think that Ben Dinnery Jr. should be a permanent fixture on the show as well. So I don't know how we're going to arrange that going forward.
I'll tell you what, there's one vote that counts.
Yeah. Yours. Well, for now, we wish everybody the best of luck. We hope that you have a fantastic game week, but also the best of health as well. And we will see you again this time next week for our usual live stream. But for now,